6 a.m., 4 hours before my father's funeral, I was standing in my bathrobe on my back porch, coffee cooling in my hand, when the first swing of the sledgehammer hit. That hollow crack rolled across my yard like a gunshot, and in 12 ugly minutes my grief therapy, my handmade chicken coop, my last piece of sanity after losing my wife, was reduced to a pile of cedar splinters by contractors hired by the Cedar Ridge Lakeside Association, while their phones recorded it like some twisted reality show. My hens exploded out of the run, feathers and panic everywhere, the smell of fresh sawdust mixing with the crushed marigolds from my wife's memorial garden. And as I watched those men trespass across my land, laughing, tearing down what had helped me survive late-night panic attacks and hospice visits, one calm, terrifying thought settled in my chest, heavier than any cinder block on that site. You really picked the wrong man's dirt to play games on. My name is Eli Mercer, third-generation electrician, recent widower, only son to a father whose dementia stole my name months before death took his body, and awkward owner of 2 stubborn acres at the bottom of Cedar Ridge Landing. That kind of luxury subdivision where people spend more on lawn care than teachers make in a year, where McMansions lean over a mirror-smooth resort lake called Silvercrest Lake, and where the HOA president, Monica Fairchild, decided my grief was a code violation. What nobody in their designer jogging gear knew, what even I didn't fully understand yet, was that 6 feet beneath my boots lay a 60-year-old drainage valve, a rust-stained well hooked into the original flood control system, a forgotten piece of infrastructure that quietly controlled about 73% of the water that kept their $5 million lake full, their 347 property values bloated, and their Instagram wedding photos looking like magazine covers. I inherited the land from my grandmother in 2019, along with boxes of her old farm paperwork that smelled like dust and engine oil, and somewhere in there I'd seen a cryptic note: emergency flood control, manual valve, see easement file. The kind of thing you skim and shrug off when you're busy burying a wife named Hannah, holding a dying father, and trying to keep the lights on in your one-man electrical business. After Hannah died from cancer, I built the coop exactly where Grandma's chickens had lived since the Eisenhower days. Not because I'd suddenly gone rural, but because grief needs something to hold, and cedar boards, warm pine shavings, and a hen named Henrietta pecking corn at sunrise did more for my head than any bottle at the liquor store. The smell of that fresh wood, the routine of feeding, the quiet clucking, all of it kept me from going under. Then came the letter, crisp white, logo of the Cedar Ridge Lakeside Association at the top, words like unauthorized agricultural structure, immediate removal, $500 fine, increasing $100 per day, and at the bottom, the signature of Monica Fairchild, HOA president, owner of a white Range Rover with vanity plates that might as well have Red Queen HOA. I called, voice shaking but polite, explained about my wife, my dad, the therapy, the history of the land, and Monica gave me that slow, practiced, sugar-coated cruelty that only certain people can manage. Mr. Mercer, I'm very sorry for your loss, truly, but grief doesn't exempt anyone from community standards. Every syllable sharpened like broken glass. Every pause a reminder that in her mind my pain was just clutter on her perfect landscape. That was the first crack in something deep inside me. I filed for a variance, denied without review, asked for mediation, not necessary, requested an extension, absolutely not. And while I kept saying please and following the rules, Monica and her board sharpened theirs. Violation notices escalated, late fees stacked up, and my father upstairs started calling me by his brother's name, while outside my window glossy kayaks glided across Silvercrest Lake, the same lake whose water, I was slowly realizing, all passed under my land first. The real game revealed itself one night at 2:47 a.m., when my new security cameras, 4 of them, night vision, installed with money I didn't really have, buzzed my phone awake. And on that grainy black and white image I saw Grant Fairchild, Monica's husband, the man who ran Fairchild Ridge Development, creeping across my property with surveying equipment, measuring angles, taking photos like he already owned the place. The next day at the county office, under fluorescent lights that hummed like tired insects, I dug through public records until my eyes blurred, and there it was, Fairchild Ridge Development, Silvercrest Phase 2, an expansion plan that required drainage access across exactly one parcel of land, mine, 2 scruffy acres at the low point of Cedar Ridge Landing. The perfect spot to route new stormwater lines. The perfect spot for a developer who didn't want to pay fair value if he could instead starve me with HOA fines, drive me into foreclosure, and grab it at auction for pennies. That's when I went back to Grandma's boxes, blew dust off 30-year-old manila folders, and found the real inheritance, the original 1960s survey, the county correspondence, and the easement agreement naming my family as manual flood control operators for the whole basin, rights that existed decades before any HOA covenant, before Cedar Ridge Landing, before Silvercrest Lake ever shimmered behind their lakefront homes. I hired Gordon Hale, a retired environmental attorney who'd moved to town for peace and quiet, and somehow landed in the middle of this mess. And when he finished reading the easement, he leaned back in his chair, smiled like a wolf in a suit, and said, "Eli, this HOA doesn't just lack authority over that valve. They've been interfering with your legal duty to maintain it." While Gordon sharpened the legal blades, the HOA escalated the petty ones. They hit me with violations for my work truck, for the backup beeper, for hospice nurses parking outside to care for my father. They even wrote me up for excessive emotional displays because a neighbor had seen me crying in the driveway after a bad day at hospice. Imagine being fined for your heartbreak not matching the aesthetic of the community. So I stopped playing nice on my own. I started a Facebook group called Cedar Ridge Property Voices, posted proof of Grant's midnight trespass, shared my story, and watched as dozens of neighbors joined and unloaded their own war stories. A mom fined for her disabled son's wheelchair van. A veteran threatened over a flagpole. An older couple hounded for a raised bed vegetable garden. A pattern emerged so clear a blind man could trace it. Monica targeted anything that dented her fantasy brochure. Then came Dr. Lila Ortiz, a state environmental scientist and sister to one of my neighbors, who saw my posts about drainage and valves and called me with a mix of curiosity and outrage. She laid out watershed maps like medical charts, explaining that every roof, every driveway, every curb in Cedar Ridge Landing had been wired to push water through my land, into pipes that fed Silvercrest Lake. And if someone still controlled the old manual valve, they essentially held the heart of the entire artificial ecosystem in their hands. We tested it one night. Just me, Lila, a flashlight, and my grandfather's old shovel in the basement. 2 hours of digging through earth that smelled like old secrets until metal rang against metal. Wrapped in oiled canvas lay a valve wheel, cold and rough, connected to a pipe thick as my arm. I turned it a quarter turn, waited, and 20 minutes later the retention pond behind my house dropped 2 inches. It was like watching a bank account drain in real time, except this account kept an entire neighborhood rich. That power sat in the back of my mind like a loaded gun as Monica's smear campaign went nuclear. Anonymous flyers in every mailbox except mine calling me unstable and dangerous. Fake reviews tanking my business. Whispered phone calls to my commercial clients until 3 of them canceled contracts in the same week. And then, just to sprinkle evil on top of cruelty, she scheduled emergency health and safety meetings to discuss certain residents in emotional crisis with PowerPoint slides of my yard in the background. And still, I didn't touch the valve all the way. Not until the morning they smashed the coop. While those contractors swung their sledgehammers 4 hours before I buried my father, my cameras caught every second, every illegal step, every board shattered without a court order, without due process. And when I stepped back into the house, past the empty recliner where my dad had asked where Hannah was for the 100th time, something inside me finally stopped asking for permission. I called Lila at County What? Sent her the easement, and she came back with numbers that made my coffee taste like pure gasoline. The valve under my coop controlled roughly 73% of inflow to Silvercrest Lake. Closing it would legally redirect water back into the original flood control pattern. Lake levels would drop 8 to 12 feet in a week. Property values would crater, resort bookings would implode, and not one line of law would have been broken. We built a war room in my kitchen, maps and easements and printouts covering every surface. Gordon walking us through legal strategy, Lila through the engineering, Rick, Tank, Dalton, a local contractor the HOA had burned, organizing blue-collar neighbors into a rotating watch to record every new stunt, and Helen Ross, a retired county clerk with a memory like a hard drive, hauling in boxes of HOA filings that proved half the board had financial ties to Grant's development company, the kind of conflict of interest a judge could hang a career on. The plan had phases: polite letters demanding restitution and an end to harassment, a mild valve demonstration if they ignored us, media exposure of the corruption if they doubled down, and one unspoken final option if they destroyed anything again: full closure, full drain, full consequences. They chose door number 4 for us. When Monica moved to file a restraining order, accusing me of making terroristic threats and plotting to poison the water, when fake witnesses lined up to say I'd ranted about blowing up property values, when I realized she was willing to label me a criminal just to keep her expansion deal alive, I walked into my basement, gripped the valve wheel with both hands, and turned it one full rotation counterclockwise, then started a stopwatch. By the next morning, Silvercrest Lake had dropped 4 feet. The beachfront weddings now overlooked a strip of gray mud that smelled like rotten fish and dead dreams. The fancy dock hung over nothing, and my phone lit up with calls from panicked residents who suddenly wanted to know everything about that weird guy on the hill with the chickens. Monica's sunrise jog ended with her standing at the edge of the exposed lakebed, screaming a sound you only hear when someone watches their net worth slide into the dirt. She called an emergency HOA meeting that night, invited the sheriff, 3 news stations, half the county, and planned to crown herself as the brave president protecting the neighborhood from the madman who had sabotaged the lake. What she didn't plan on was a room full of my supporters: Gordon with a briefcase, Lila with official maps, Tank with photos, Helen with files, and cameras rolling from every angle. She opened with drama, slides of the drained lake, the word terrorism doing a lot of heavy lifting. And when she finally said my name, waiting for the chorus of gasps, what she got instead was silence, and then, slowly, a few boos. I stood, walked to the front with my grandmother's yellowed easement papers, and told the room the truth, that my family's valve and rights predated their HOA by almost 40 years, that county engineers had confirmed my authority and obligation to operate it, that I had never broken a single law while they had trespassed, harassed, and destroyed property during my father's last days. Then Lila stepped outside with my phone, live streaming as she stood over the valve, visible through the clubhouse windows, and at my nod, she turned the wheel a quarter turn back. Within minutes, everyone in that room watched the retention pond begin to rise, water flowing exactly where the map said it would: slow, steady, lawful. Deputy Williams cleared his throat and said what everyone needed to hear: that no crime had been committed, that this was a property rights issue, not terrorism, and that if any laws had been broken, they were likely in those boxes of records Helen was now stacking on the table. What followed wasn't a meeting, it was a collapse. Helen presented 5 years of conflicts of interest, missing funds, secret votes, side deals between Monica, Grant, and other board members. The secretary, Claire Benson, resigned on the spot. 3 board members called for a vote of no confidence. Resort reps slid toward the back door like they were trying to escape a sinking ship, and when Monica stormed out, shouting that she'd ruin every last one of you, the applause chasing her into the parking lot sounded like thunder. 6 months later, Monica Fairchild stood in front of a judge and heard 18 months for fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy to harass. Grant's development firm folded, Phase 2 died on paper, and a new board at Cedar Ridge Lakeside Association reversed every action against me, paid double damages for my coup, covered my legal bills, and delivered a written apology I framed next to one of Hannah's recipes in my kitchen. My land, those 2 stubborn acres, turned into Cedar Ridge Heritage Farm and Watershed Center, an environmental education site Lila helped certify. Neighborhood kids come to collect eggs, learn how water actually moves under their feet, see the original valve that almost sank their home values. We started an easement defense fund that's now helped families in other towns push back when their HOAs tried the same tricks. A mom kept her wheelchair van, a vet kept his flagpole, a gardener kept her tomatoes, because we taught them how to read their deeds and not just their threat letters. Property values bounced back, and then some. Turns out buyers like a community that learned its lesson, more than one pretending it never did anything wrong. And every sunrise I stand on my porch, coffee warm in my hand, watching Henrietta's grandchicks scratch in new cedar shavings over the same ground my grandmother worked. listening to the quiet rush of water going exactly where it's supposed to go. The lake sparkles again, but everyone in Cedar Ridge Landing knows it stays that way not because of an HOA president with a clipboard, but because one quiet electrician with chickens has a rusted wheel in his basement and the law on his side. So here's what I still ask myself, and now I'm asking you too. When people in power use rules and fear to crush the vulnerable, when they weaponize grief and community against a single person, is it wrong to hit back with the only leverage you have if it means exposing corruption and protecting others? Or is that the exact kind of justice a decent society secretly relies on?